So we must do two things, two great things together to encompass that enormous new view that lies before us, but to encompass it within the framework of science, to see it within the whole categorical framework of science, and to see that these two are not separate, but that they are wedded. The bigness of the idea, the newness of the idea, the greatness of it is one with the structure of science, the structure of being itself. Matthew really, it must have been the writing of Matthew, that Matthew compiled all of these tremendous incidents that were going on in Jesus' life, compiled them in a certain definite way with certain accentuations. Matthew wanted to accentuate the word. He wanted to accentuate the word order as the line of light within Jesus' life. He wanted to accentuate life, truth, and love as the impulsion behind that way of life. So he chose carefully his illustrations, and having reached the sixth standpoint, the sixth day of truth in Jesus' life, would have to select those illustrations that showed how the true calculus was formed, was being formed. So with that woman, he could illustrate the right beginning, the right beginnings, namely the inductive method of how to work up to God, that there is a right way, that within the table, from the table, where all the crumbs are, within that table there is the inductive method and the deductive method, the ascending way and the descending way. This woman illustrated the right approach to that ascending way of understanding, which is a scientific means for working up to God. Yes, working up to the wholeness of perfection, wherein we would see that every part is a perfect part, a perfect whole, and that this will cause you to arrive really at love, to arrive at the standpoint of perfection. You see, she represented the inductive method. When you come to the story of the feeding of the 4,000, this represents or illustrates the deductive way. Because the disciples came to him, let's just see that a little bit more. The disciples said to him, "Whence should we have so much bread in the wilderness as to fill so great a multitude?" And Jesus saith, "Well, how many loaves have ye?" And they said, 7. Just 7 loaves. only 7. And a few fishes. Yes, they had a few fishes. You know, we think, gosh, I've only got a little bit. I only know a little bit about science. I've only got the 7 and the 4. I only know. Huh? I only know that that it's a 7-fold nature. Maybe I know a little bit about those 7. And I know that the 4 operate. They are the multipliers. The 4 will multiply the 7. And you see that if we have those few fishes, and they're the right ones, they're the right fish, the right few, the calculus of the 4, then we have infinite provision. There's just no end to that. Because they are holistic. And then you see how he proceeded to use the deductive method. He came out from the wholeness of the 7 and the 4. He took them and gave thanks. That's a lovely touch, huh? He said, thank you. Thank you beforehand. He said, thank you. This is the retrocausality of love, to say thank you for taking care of this situation before it had actually been taken care of on this plane. So he said, gave thanks and break them. He broke the loaves. He began the deductive process of breaking the loaves in the descending way, where you begin to break down. Now, what is that infinite one? You begin to see it's the 7 and the 4, and then you break down the 7 and the 4, and you break down the 7 to ideas of the 7, and so on and so on. And that's illustrated here. It says, he brake them and gave to his disciples, and the disciples to the multitude. You hear that? It's the structural hierarchy of the model of being, the design of being, to begin with one, and then it becomes more and more and more and more, until it reaches every level, touches every plane, and answers the need of every plane without ever running out, without ever losing anything. And they did all eat. Everyone ate and were filled up. Because whatever they eat, it's the same thing, right? It's the same nature, it's the same operation. They're all eating the same thing. But that which they're eating is holistic, so it has within it whatever the individual needs. Whatever the individual needs. Yeah, okay. So we've just seen in those two wonderful subtones of truth as mind and truth as spirit, the inductive method and the deductive method of science, as though life would be impelling upon us the method of science, the method of wholeness, the method of how to bring about or give birth to this calculus, this true immortal calculus of man within our own consciousness. Then, returning to the Bible text, you see that after all of that had taken place and Jesus had demonstrated the deductive method through the feeding of the 4,000, through the 7 loaves and 4 fishes, that he then asked his disciples, and now we come to really the breaking in of truth. Let me make that side remark or that preliminary remark that the impulsion of life now gives way to the factuality of truth, the Christ truth, and it is truth as soul. So you will hear now soul coming in, asking now about identity, as though to say, who am I? And this is what Jesus actually did ask of his disciples. Who am I? Whom do men say that I, the Son of Man, am? And they said, well, some say that thou art John the Baptist, some Elias, and others Jeremias, or one of the prophets. You hear how tenacious this tendency to go back to the old paradigm is, huh? Not to recognize what is right in front of your face. After all that he had been doing and showing forth, that they would say, well, folks say that you might be John the Baptist. So he says, do you know who I am now? And their answer is, they don't know. They don't know yet who he is. They don't understand who he is. He said, "But whom say ye that I am?" Well, other folks say that so-and-so. Well, what do you say? And only Simon Peter answered and said, "Thou art the Christ, the Son of the living God." You see that correct identification, that true identification as the Christ truth, the Son of the living God. He's asking his disciples and this identity question, and you can see that only Peter gets it right. Peter gets it right. And Jesus says, "Blessed art thou, Simon Bar-Jonah." Well, he really makes it known when somebody gets it right, doesn't he? He really makes a point of saying, yes, this is the correct answer. "Blessed art thou, for flesh and blood hath not revealed it unto thee, but my Father which is in heaven. And I will give thee the keys of the kingdom of heaven." Wow. He also says, "I say unto thee that thou art Peter, and upon this rock I will build my church, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it." And then that reference to giving the keys of the kingdom, really, what is it that opens the kingdom and unlocks it? It's the conscious understanding of the 7, the 4, and the 4. So to that conscious recognition that sees the Christ and recognizes it and knows the Christ, this is the consciousness that will receive from that consciousness the keys of the kingdom, the categories of being. And you know, somewhere in the textbook it says that none can pick the lock. You can't pick that lock. You have to have the key of David, don't you? The key of David. And she refers to that key of David before she presents the key to the Scriptures. She says the key to the Scriptures is this key of David. It is the 7 and the 4. They unlock everything. They unlock the kingdom of the 4, the dimensional 4. You have the 7 and the 4 again really shown to be at the heart of this question of the true calculus, the Christ calculus, that is going to resolve fully the mortal calculus. So the spirit sense of it comes out there where he says, "Blessed art thou." You see, the blessed state of recognizing the Christ idea for what it is. And flesh and blood doesn't reveal that. Only my Father which is in heaven, my Father which is in heaven, which is always a spirit tone. So we receive the keys to the kingdom of heaven. And now comes in the breaking in of the truth tone and truth as soul. And it says, "From that time forth began Jesus to show that he must go unto Jerusalem, suffer many things, be killed, and be raised again the 3rd day." Here comes the soul tone. As though to say, now I can tell you what my destiny, my greatest mission, my highest mission is, what lies ahead imminently. Then Peter, now here comes Peter again. He had gotten it right? A couple of verses back. Here comes Peter and says, he began to rebuke Jesus, saying, "Be it far from thee, Lord. This shall not be unto thee." But he turned and said unto Peter, Get thee behind me, Satan. Peter rebuked him. Peter rebuked something in the Christ which he had recognized, which he had just recognized and identified. And now you see that he rebukes that, and then the Christ consciousness rebukes that. You see the ups and downs of Peter. He's up 1 minute, down the next, as we are. It needs to be evened out. He needs to be evened out. He's still dealing with a lot of these things when we come into the final tone of love and to the crucifixion and his part in that whole story. He seems to be an example of extremes, doesn't he? Extremes within our makeup, going from the human sense to the spiritual sense, recognizing the divine, and then falling back down to do the most human thing and to err in so doing. Jesus says, Thou art an offense unto me, for thou savorest not the things that be of God, but those that be of men. Jesus was really pointing out that he had a mission to fulfill, that he knew what that mission was, that it was retrally caused. Retrocausality was the source. Love was the source. Love was the goal and had set the goal all along the way, and that it was his greatest fulfillment to fulfill this mission. So anything that would come in to try to save the human from that situation, from that condition, was an offense. It's offensive. Because he had to go through that experience in order to bring forth the fulfillment of his highest calling. Yes, okay.